Welcome to Sweat, Tears and Equity, a podcast by Fortech Investments, where we discuss the untold truths of funding and funding startups. Our guests are founders, investors, and other players from the ecosystem who learn these valuable lessons the hard way. They share the things that they wish they knew earlier about the challenges that lie in this journey, the things that no one prepared them for, so you and other founders can navigate this bumpy road successfully. Today we have Luca Știrbăț, the CEO of Creative Motion, a Bucharest startup studio, and also head of ReaktorX, an accelerator. Luca, I would like you to tell us a little bit more about both these, let's say, endeavors, and also, of course, about the synergies between them, because early on I've heard you speaking a little bit about them both. And I'm really curious to see how a young, let's say, entrepreneur is making things happen in both a startup studio and also an accelerator.
Right. So thanks for having me first. Wonderful to be here. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible because I do have the tendency to keep on opening little parentheses. So
I just want to encourage you to go for that and be really.
So we can open as many tabs as we want.
Sure. Why not?
Okay. So from the top, the startup studio, it first started as a robotics team when I was in high school, and we were kind of winning the robotics competitions, and then we realized, okay, robotics, but what next? And then we switched to the software agency model, and that happened when I was like a 10th grader student in high school, and I started taking on customers and clients, and I realized, well, I'm developing these products for them. Why aren't I developing these products for myself? Why am I doing it? So I kind of let's kill a software agency, and we pivoted into what it is now, a startup studio. And a bit about the model. A startup studio basically comes up with an idea or a concept internally, which is done through market research from the core team, and then validates it, finds a couple of pieces of information, some insights that could actually lead to a proper business. And afterwards, after it's got a bit of traction, a bit of revenue, they spin it off into a different company, into a different entity, and they keep a part of the equity. So 10, 12, 20%, it really depends on the startup studio's model. So that's kind of like the basics of a startup studio, which is quite new, started in 2000 first, with Bill Gross, with his Idea Lab, first startup studio you could call, but back then nobody knew it was a startup studio, right? So this is kind of like a fresh new wave of startup building, this kind of startup studio model. And some famous examples, for example, Moderna is a startup studio built. It's a startup
building a startup studio, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Could you tell me about your startup studio setup and how do you operate? Because we've seen different models like agnostic studios that are building products throughout industries, or vertical studios where you have, health tech, and that's where you would try to build products. Also, what type of industry experts you guys are using for building those products? Are you using internal resources, partnerships? Could you please expand a little bit more about your model?
Sure. So our model is a builder studio because there are two types, investor and builder studios. We are a builder studio because we don't have the capital. We haven't fundraised or did anything like that. We don't have capital to invest into the startup. So we invest sweat, basically, our time, our effort. And the research is done internally because our vertical is sustainability. It's in the green space, let's kind of save the planet because that's what my generation is really into, right? Gen Z is really into, having a planet for the future. It's not so hard, guys. So it's kind of like the vertical that we chose because this is what we felt our mission leads us towards, right? This kind of innovation in the green space. And how it works is basically our internal team does their research in an area, in a topic that they're interested in. For example, right now we're working in a circular economy furniture startup that's kind of like doing the research on the furniture model, right? How it looks traditionally, how it's built, how it's thrown out 6 months later by people buying from some Swedish folks, and how that affects all of us. And there's plenty of know-how, there's plenty of research being done there by a lot of great NGOs. Yet nobody takes that know-how and builds it into a business or in a startup that could really leverage that into a new model that's benefiting everyone, right? So that's kind of like the vertical, and again, the builder model. We don't take a lot of equity though, because we also don't have capital to do follow-on rounds. So we take about 20%, between 15 and 20%. But in the case of this one, the furniture one, we take about 20% with the expectation that we're going to have 5% by the exit, because of course we're going to be diluted at every single investment round. So that's kind of the whole model of it.
When do you think is the sweet spot to go in a spin-off stage? You mentioned traction. Are you looking for that before you go and create a company and attract VCs and angels?
Yeah, we're not spinning it off before we've got the investments. So we really wait for someone to say, okay, look, I want to put in some capital into this. Let's spin it off. We have one spin-off, Cruise, which is a carpooling app for corporates to group people to go together to the office and back home. So you save some CO2 and you get the CO2 report and so on. So for that, we did have to spin it off because one of our programs in EIT where we got an investment and legally we had to spin it off to get the investment, right? But if you were to ask me, I would use the Startup Studio legal entity for as long as possible. For example, we certify the Startup Studio entity now to be able to sell furniture. So we can use it to help the startup that we're building right now, the one with the furniture, right? Because spinning it off into a legal entity and incurring all of the costs, which, okay, for Romania, they're not that high. Let's say 200 euros a month. Still, 200 euros a month put into like some performance ads, that's going to make a big difference, right? So keep it on the main legal entity for as long as possible. But yeah, when you've got like an investor, an angel, a professional investor, a VC, an accelerator, whatever, you're kind of legally forced to switch into a spin-off.
Cool. Now, tell us a little bit also about the acceleration program, the ReaktorX.
That's a like super funny story how I got started with that, because I was working on the Startup Studio, right? Like, how did I get into it? And I saw an investment analyst position for one venture capital fund in Poland, Smoke Ventures, and was like, okay, these guys look cool, decent.
You could do that,
yeah,
of course.
I can do that on the side. It's like side, sure, and then I'll learn about the VC industry because I was very unaware of it. So then I applied. It was like 4 months of silence. It's like, okay, sure, I didn't get it. It's
pretty
fine,
obvious.
No worries. And then after 4 months, Boris, the GP of the venture fund, was like, hey, I just saw your profile. You want to chat? It was like 7 a.m. I was butt naked. I was in my bed, just trying to wake up. It's like, yeah, sure, we can talk. When do you want to talk? It's like, now. Okay, put on a shirt. I pretended I was awake, but I was like so hungover after that night. And I was like, hi, Boris. Hi, what's up? Oh, look, we're trying to do this and we're trying to see if Romania is a potential investment market. And I'm like, yes, please come to Romania. Invest in Romania. It's going to be so great. And they're like, okay, we like your energy. Let's see what we can do. So I organized a couple of events for them here in Romania to get to meet the startup, to get to meet the ecosystem. And they liked it. And of course, they liked me, but they were like, look, seems kind of small. So it doesn't really justify for us to have an investment analyst in Romania. Because again, the ecosystem from their perspective compared to Poland was tentatively small. Like, well, okay, I organized 2 events for you guys. I mean, what else have you got? Let's negotiate. Let's discuss. Let's find. So they're like, hey, we do have this accelerator, which was like the biggest accelerator in Poland for a while. And then the pandemic hit and then nobody took over. And so maybe you'd like to do that. I was like, well, I have the know-how from the Startup Studio, which I could take and apply to the accelerator. And I could also set a couple of terms that I really like because I've been through a lot of accelerators with the startups from the Startup Studio and I knew what worked and what didn't. It's like, I'm in the perfect position to take this on. Me thinking like very stupidly that I'm great for this. Of course, I had a lot of learnings throughout. And then I took over. I was like, okay, look, I'll take this, but only if we do it like this in my formula. So in my formula, there are no workshops. we aren't doing any workshops throughout the whole acceleration period. And they just looked at me and they're like, are you all right up here? Because, usually that's the bread and butter of the accelerator. And I was like, no, we're not doing any workshops. This is the know-how that we're going to use. And if the founder doesn't already have the know-how or doesn't learn it on their own throughout the program, are they really an investable company? Right? Okay, fair enough. Good point. Let's see. They were willing to do an experiment with me. So we did the experiment. We ran the first batch. We had 245 applicants, out of which we selected 5. And we invested $25,000 for a 5% equity stake in each of the startups. Now, this is the very important part and another thing of how I twisted the formula of the accelerator. Because I realized that all of the accelerator were either equity-free or taking 1-2%, something like that, without any investment ticket. And I mean, honestly, not a lot of founders who work in the Eastern European region have $10,000, $20,000, something like that to invest into their startup, which honestly is more than enough to start something. It's okay, if I'm doing this, you as the VC, you're coming in, you're investing this $25,000, you're taking 5%, so that there's some actual capital into the company and they can actually use it to start. So they don't have an excuse I don't have enough to pay my brand designer, or I don't have enough to pay my developer or whatever. So they don't have any excuse throughout the whole program. And then us as the accelerator, we take 1%, but our 1% is dilutable. Our 1% will probably be bought out at the first investment. And our 1% isn't there's no follow-on capital, so we're not going to be able to keep it at 1%. I mean, we're going to be dead equity after the program ends, so we're going to be first ones out. So in this case, kind of the accelerator takes a hit. It's not the real money-making machine out of the whole thing, but for the startup is the best deal they could get, right? Because they get the 1% basically freed up at the next investment round. So it's kind of like a deal for sure 6% now, but realistically kind of 5%.
Okay, that's a cool model. So basically behind the accelerator, you have a fund.
Yes.
That will help you with your selection of ideas, startups, and
yes.
that will help you build the products and of course go to market with them.
For now.
But
for the next batch that's going to happen in spring, we're going to have 3 VCs behind the program. And we're going to take up the deal to $75,000 for 7%.
Wow, that's interesting. Are all the VCs from the region?
One Polish one, one Turkish one, which wants to enter the Eastern European region. And the third one, it's an open position. And right now I'm discussing with 2 funds. So it might be a US one. It might be a Polish one. It's kind of in between. I don't know yet. But we'll be sure to announce it,
That's really interesting, man. I think, it's not an easy business to do for people that are not so aware of these models of the venture studios, startup studios, or even acceleration programs, especially here in Romania. This is not an easy business to do, and it's really hard to attract, let's say, not money, but VCs, angels, any stakeholder that could actually help you with money. And yet you're doing this at 24 years old. So again, I'm coming back because I think you have a very unique and fresh perspective on how to do things, and that's really helpful. On the other side, I think there's a new customer, there's a new profile that we need to understand more and more. Also, in terms of workforce, we need to understand the Gen Zs more and more, because there's so many stories about how a Gen Z it actually dehumanizes when you talk about it like that. But there's generational gaps, always, and it will always be like this. But I think right now, due to technology, the gaps are getting even larger and wider. So, what would you say that? And I don't want to use benchmarks like millennials or Xennial. I think I'm an Xennial or whatever. But what do you think is the ingredient that a Gen Z has right now, and that will allow him to be an entrepreneur and will allow him to be a leader? And you often see that. What would you say that is?
I'd say that my generation is very displeased with how things are, which is exactly what we need for entrepreneurship. I mean, they don't like how go to a Gen Z and tell them that, by 24, they should own a house. That's a joke, right? And they're very displeased with the fact that all of the other generations and their expectations were met in a way or another. Millennials were the first to feel the brunt of, this income inequality. But now Gen Z has to really live with it for the rest of their lives, with the fact that they're not going to be able to own most of the stuff, that they're going to be paying subscriptions out their nose, and they're going to be every single day is going to be a struggle for, I have another 10 euros to pay for this, for a subscription to running water or something like that. It's dystopic for now, the direction that we're going towards, right? So I think that Gen Z being so displeased and growing up in this kind of dystopic world, they're going to be making a huge difference, because they're going to pull us back on track with their spirit, with their interests, with general entrepreneurship, of course, but not just through the entrepreneurial acts, but through the artistic acts. I mean, if you go to any cultural place here in Bucharest, or to any play at the theater that's written by a Gen Z, you're going to see the main topics attacked that are income inequality, gender inequality, general politics, and how bad it gets, right? How bad you don't even know if you're voting for this party, and then it changes overnight into something else differently. So they're really conflicted over what the world is going to look like. And this is the best place, because it's going to inspire them to make a big change. I would say, though, that we're also kind of old. I mean, we're getting really. I'm 24 and I'm a Gen Z, right? And we're starting to get on the job market, and we're starting to see that
into the workforce.
Right? The salaries are not what we expect, but I'm looking at Gen Alpha right now, 16, 17, right? They're gonna get there. I don't recognize them.
This is why we're talking about how the gap between generations are increasing.
Yeah.
And of course, we can identify why that is. But I want to come back with to Gen Z specifics, because it's really interesting. Also, you mentioned that they're getting into the workforce and that there are expectations. But then again, we live in such a different world right now. Since 2020, everything changed, and it continues to change. I also believe that the revolution mindset can add so much value. But in the same time, I think that we need to, I don't know if Gen Zs are aware of this, but we need to keep politics outside of what we're doing, because it can get dangerous. And I think that Gen Zs are really promising. I actually worked with the Gen Zs when I worked in a startup, and I managed the sales force, let's say, of a few people, and I was so surprised in the best way possible with their work ethic. I mean, they need to believe in something, and I think that's so powerful. I didn't have that. My generation didn't have that. We were so. I guess I was a little bit shallow, because I wanted to get things, to accumulate things, because I'm an 80s child. Actually 90s kid, but I was born in the 80s. So yeah, of course I wanted to accumulate. But I see them so mature right now and so smart. And I think they're willing to disrupt a lot of things. That's why I asked you, what are the ingredients for that you see these Gen Z new leaders that are up and coming that they have? And you partially answered the question. I mean, yeah, you want to change the status quo, but I think that's you saw that in all generations. We were unsatisfied with our elders, and we wanted to bring something fresh to the table. But would you say that there's a lot of courage right now within your generation, and not only courage, but would you say that you are believers?
I wouldn't jump so far. No. I mean, I'd say that Gen Z is actually more pragmatic and more cynical, actually, than previous generations. We're very cynical about stuff because, look, maybe that's how it looks from the outside, that we need a mission, we need a vision, we need something. But honestly, when you're giving a starting offer to a Gen Z of like 700 euros and rent is 600, and then you're like, of course you're going to be very cynical and you're going to be ultra pragmatic and, okay, I'm going to go work for whoever can actually cover it. And I've seen my generation go work for companies they don't believe in, right? In tobacco companies, petrol companies, stuff that's going to go out of business soon. But they go work there because, first of all, the pay is great. And second of all, they can sabotage them from the inside.
Okay. So
it's a great approach, honestly. I mean, hey, can you blame them? You know?
No. It's not about blaming, but on the same in the same token, I mean, you don't go to work for somebody just to sabotage them. Or if you believe that something is wrong, don't do that. I just wanted to check with you if maybe this mindset will help spawn larger numbers of entrepreneurs, of peers that would love to make their own businesses. I mean, I see this in the brick and mortar businesses. I see it in Bucharest all over. If you look, you see a lot of barista coffee shops, all that type of brick and mortar businesses that are led by a lot of Gen Zs. Will this, I don't know, market somehow force them to become their own business owners?
Yes, but not in the good sense. So I know it's controversial a bit, but you do realize that you go into a company, you get this like salary offer, you realize it's not good. So then you think, oh, I'm capable enough, I'll start a business. And you start a barber shop, you start a coffee shop, you start a donut shop, you start a whatever. Then you realize you're working 12 hours a day, night and day, no parties, no nothing, no free time, no time for family, no nothing like that. And you're getting paid maybe even less because you put in back the capital hoping that the business will succeed. And then you've got a colossus just coming in and being like, okay, I'll just leverage the government and I'll monopolize this market. And then you realize that Gen Z is forced into entrepreneurship, into choosing entrepreneurship, although it's not much of a choice.
True.
I mean, through entrepreneurship, right? There's levels to it. You can be a normal entrepreneur that builds a business, standard business with validated model. You can be a startup entrepreneur that builds something on an unvalidated model, and you need to do a lot of research. And in that space, Gen Z really thrives because they're into finding solutions, finding new ideas, finding new proposals, changing things, changing the status quo. That's the revolution part. But in the normal entrepreneurship, I'd say that we're doing a very bad job in preparing this new generation. They're going to be so much more skilled than previous generations. Yes, because they've run a business and they're going to most probably fail because that's what happens with most businesses. Then they're going to go into the job market 10 times better prepared. But they're still not going to get the salaries that are expected and, the livable salaries. And one thing you said previously that I think Gen Z is very adamant about, we're not about politics, we're about policy. And I think it's a big difference between this. And we do tend to say, oh, politics is all crap. And although we're the generation that went out to vote most of the times compared to our previous generations, right?
True.
We're very active about that. And we criticize politics because we're not talking about policy. What are the policies? How should the government start implementing these policies? We keep talking about people, but it's about the law. We're talking about the policies that could help the people.
Yeah, but
there's no conversation at that level.
True. All the generations since the revolution, we are all aware that although they are linked, politics and policies, they are linked.
Yeah.
But we are aware that we need larger country programs that we need to stick. No matter the color of the politics.
That's why you see that the young generation really supports the European economic area and what the European Parliament does and what the European Council does through the GDPR laws, through the AI laws. You ask any entrepreneur, any startup entrepreneur, and they say, "Oh, Europe, with their policy, blocking innovation, they've done an incredible job in protecting the users and in building strong policy to protect the users and generally the population." I think that's wonderful. We should be pushing for more policy in this area, not limiting it. I think that's a big advantage that us as Europeans have.
And frankly, you seem to be really aware of that. I was also talking about like local things that we actually need to improve here. But also the Gen Zs need to appear in the policy, in the policy making, let's say, or in the politics more and more. And I don't see them for now. I see them online. I see their opinions, but I don't see materializing in something, and hopefully something will appear here also.
We love complaining. 100% we love complaining.
But I think
stuff
that's a cultural thing, man. It's not only you. We all love complaining here.
Yeah.
How do you see the relationship between the local funding ecosystem and the Gen Z founder? What do they need to know in order to approach things in a way that will bring them, I don't know, will allow them to touch on their objectives? Mm-hmm. Is there something that you could? But I want you to ask this from both perspectives, not only the Gen Z founder, let's say, or the young entrepreneur, but I want to have this discussion also in order to allow VCs to even better understand the persona that you guys are.
Right. Gen Z founder, how do they look? Where do you find them? What's kind of like the things that they're into? Right? So that you know how to bring them on board as a portfolio company.
Of course.
A great example of this and a great company, I think, I can give examples, right, of companies and portfolio companies. And I'm asking just for the...
Sure, let's go.
Okay, small startup, right?
Okay.
Small startup from Poland, in Streamly, the head of marketing, Victoria. She's 25. The startup raised, I don't know, more than 1 million, clearly, and they've got clients they're working with, like some really big brands. What do? Advertising during gaming streams. What does Gen Z love most? Gaming. I mean, honestly, all of us, at one point or another, we've played a game, at least Candy Crush. Like Gen Z, we're the most game-driven community. That's how we blow off steam. That's how we kind of go into a virtual world to disconnect from the real world and its woes and so on. So we love gaming. Gaming is a big thing for us. She operates in the gaming space. That's where you're going to find a lot of Gen Z. Because that's kind of like the area that attracts us. Again, in sustainability, that's where you're going to find them. You're going to rarely find a Gen Z CEO doing biotech. Not because we're not interested in it, just because they're not expert enough in it to be able to start a startup in that space. Right?
And yet, you're talking about expertise, but sometimes it happens that, and maybe I will give an example. It's a random example. An angel investor could look at things that you're too young, you're not prepared. How do you mitigate that? I don't know, bias, because it is a bias. And I met a lot of people thinking that. I met a lot of people thinking that, being 22 or whatever until you're, let's say in your 20s, okay? You're not enough prepared. You haven't experienced life so that you will be prepared to, I don't know, do conflict management or run a business when it gets tough, not when it's easy.
Right.
How do you, I don't know, maybe disprove that belief? That's my question to you.
I think, again, we could talk about it like for hours, but let's just talk examples, right? Sure. We've got Alex from Flip, Alex and George, right?
Yeah.
2 guys started Flip when they were in uni, in the same uni I was as well. This guy wrote his thesis at uni based on Flip. The only way to kind of go over this bias is show knowledge, show know-how, show that you've learned what others didn't. Right? At 22, you know a lot about the industry you want to operate in. You're like an expert in it. You know exactly how it works. That's the only way you're going to overcome this investor bias. Of course, it's gonna happen. It happened for us as well, and for good merit, right? We had no idea how to build a hardware product, and yet we were trying to fundraise, and the angel was like, "Okay, guys, have you ever built a hardware product? No. Do you know the procedures? Do you know what injection molding is? Do you know how to create a 3D printed circuit board? Do you know how to operate it? Do you know how to code it? Have you ever done embedded code?" It's like, no. But we need 1 million from you to do it. Of course, they're going to say no. Show that you've accumulated know-how, because that's going to be the main thing that's going to blow away bias, really.
True. And I am a believer in the fact that you can be a domain expert young. And you're not supposed to be 40. You can be a domain expert young. And it's always linked with passion. I mean, if I see somebody who has a lot of passion, it doesn't matter the age. Of course, you should be seasoned enough, but you don't have to be over 30 just to be qualified as a leader. You can do that if you're passionate, and also if you understand the industry. Because you mentioned industries, you mentioned gaming now. Could you give me like 2 or 3 more examples of industries where young people or that are attracted or attractive for young for the young generation? Yeah.
For the young generation, I think there's a couple of big lines that we follow. Of course, we follow the sustainability line, and there's plenty of startups being built in the sustainability line. And thank God for that.
What do you think about ESG?
ESG is just the policy name for sustainability, right? I mean, ESG is ultimately the way that you measure the success of those sustainability startups, right? It has to hit those metrics and those agreed upon metrics. I would take it as a like medium guideline to follow, not particularly to follow it to the line, because again, you might be really innovating in the space, and based on the ESG, you don't respect it and you have no trouble. You can't measure it, right? So I'd say that, just a guideline, honestly. So sustainability, clearly, one of our preferred areas. Gaming, huge. Gaming, movies, music is and will be for Gen Z a big, really big space. Especially music. Like, look at the music revolution that's happened in the last 3 to 4 years. New artists popping up, like 17, 18, 19, making millions of streams on Spotify and all of those. So again, really big space, games, movies, music. I'd say another one is fintech, surprisingly, because it's such an incumbent industry. Everybody's like, but you have regulation and you have to be like this. And that's why we see things like Revoltwise and neobanks and all of those popping up, because it's a very fresh space to innovate in.
Do you take in consideration blockchain?
It's hard to take into consideration blockchain because I'm quite cynical about the whole Web3 thing.
Your generation is cynical. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, of course, there's some Gen Z who are more optimistic about it, and I know friends of mine who've built some great Web3 tools and Web3 spaces. And maybe it's going to be something I know too little, and I got interested in it too little to be able to offer like a proper opinion on it. Yeah.
It's a community around blockchain, and it gets to a point where you see like cult type behaviors, but it could be a technology. I mean, if you look at it from a cult perspective, there's a lot of value in blockchain, and especially in the transaction part. Of course, it's dangerous to the already existing system, but I don't see a lot of Gen Zs near blockchain. Maybe it's just something that
I've seen a lot of Gen Zs around blockchain and around crypto, and like most of the people in the space that I know are Gen Z. But, it's actually not in my area of interest, because me being in sustainability, I actually learned how difficult it is from the point of like energy to run a blockchain system, and how energy consuming it is and how much it hurts our environment.
But doesn't that apply a little bit also on the AI space?
It does. It does, unfortunately, because it does take a lot of processing power. But the best part about the AI is, the algorithms have space to improve. And there's plenty of space to improve the algorithms of an AI to make it more efficient and more easy to operate. In terms of blockchain, there's just by design so many devices connected that they're going to consume a lot of energy to run all of those calculations and to dehash the protocols and so on. I mean, not a big fan of that, honestly.
Okay.
But again, it's just me. There's plenty of Gen Zs who are very passionate about it.
Maybe that's a space where you can build something. to solve that problem. I know it's not easy, but if I was to ask you, what do you think that the next unicorn from? I'm just asking. I know unicorn is not something that we need to talk. Yeah, we're speculating because we already know that unicorns are not so mainstream, especially the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But if I were to ask you, what do you think that would be in the space? I mean, in terms of industry, and let's say it would be funded by a young entrepreneur.
Energy. In the energy space, generating green energy, managing green energy, delivering green energy, tracking green energy, analytics on energy, and so on. I mean, with the whole crisis just eastern of us, I mean, close by,
of course, sure,
it's going to be a very big push. It's already a big push government-wise, and we're seeing a lot of change towards green energy and towards moving to this more sustainable form of generating energy. I know a founder who's like 26, so Gen Z basically, who's building this kind of like marketplace for energy products and for solar panels and for charging stations and so on. She's doing very well. It's only going up. I mean, also energy space is a big space for Gen Z to work in, and which we'd like to solve, honestly, because again, it's one of the things that we're so comfortable with the tech that we have now, and we realize we either take down our energy levels, which is reducing our use of these comforts that we have every single day, or we find an alternative to that energy. So it's very dependent on us. We really want it fixed.
This brings me to something that I wanted to ask you, I think even earlier on. I know that you started in robotics, and we're talking now about energy. It gets to a point when we need to talk about new hardware.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know. How do you set up a startup that its core business, starts from a hardware product? And it's so different from building something digital, software, and so on, another platform, another telemedicine thing, I don't know. How do you build a product that has a hardware component, and yet you want to disrupt something and create something so new? And then you need to source parts. And then you need to see how
the manufacturer.
All that. And all the operational thing. How would you address, or how would you, if you come from the educational part, from the accelerator, how would you mentor somebody that wants to build a startup that is based on a hardware product? And how do you see also from your experience?
Yeah, well, I've built like the first startup that we've built was this vest for cyclists, which was hardware, right? The biggest problem with that was we had no expertise in building that hardware, but we learned so much. We learned what it means to do injection molding. We know how microchips work, how to design them, how to actually put them together, how to code them, how to do embedded code, and so on. So there's plenty to learn. And I think the space is very easy now to enter and to learn the know-how that you need behind building hardware. Because there's microcontrollers, there's kits, there's easy to build robots. Even Lego has a robot kit where you can start working and learning on the hardware side. However, for a founder who's building in the hardware space, like my own advice is find a software component to it, or find a way to monetize subscription or on a monthly basis. And I know this is kind of like crap, honestly, because the whole Gen Z is kind of tired of subscriptions, but they're not going anywhere because they're generating so much value. Like in a hardware product, you only get to charge someone once, and you have to have a big enough margin on it so that it covers you for the rest of the time, right? And you can only sell that kind of once or twice or maybe something like that.
But you can use a hardware product to enhance your subscription model.
Exactly. That's what I would guide a founder towards, right?
Okay.
Have a software component to your hardware so that you can charge for the software component and even give away the hardware for free. That could work. Or if you're a purely hardware startup, like I wouldn't say the furniture stuff is like 100% startup, right? Because of the scalability factor. But in our case, it's 100% hardware. There's no software behind it. So how do we enable it? How do we maybe make it different? So we said, okay, instead of buying the furniture, you rent it. You subscribe to it. And then you can change the components, change the elements of the furniture itself. So make it very granular, right?
Okay.
So then there's benefits to it. But I wouldn't advise anyone to like just build hardware that you sell once for two reasons. One is cash flow. Clearly, it's murder for your cash flow. And then you have to invest into going out of the country or, going to other markets. And that, again, is very expensive. So it's not a very cash flow positive business. And you need a lot of capital to burn through. So first reason. Second reason, though, is because of our consumption patterns. They've changed. We are no longer buying things, using them, and throwing them in the trash, like Gen X and boomers before us, right? That kind of trend is dying down. We're seeing secondhands really go up. We're seeing people buying reusable stuff. We're seeing circular economy growing really well. So if you're building a hardware product and you're building it with redundancy in mind, that's not going to really fly. I mean, look at the case of Apple recently, like last week, right? They said, well, we recycle 95% of the aluminum we use in our iPhones. Okay, great, awesome. And then last week, it was revealed that they were sending old iPhones, perfectly usable devices, to the trash. And they were just chopping them up with the batteries inside. No recycling of the screens, no recycling of the cases, no nothing. And it was a whistleblower from the company that they worked with that this was happening.
A Gen Z probably, right?
Yes. most probably, honestly.
You said... no, I don't want to interrupt your flow. Please go ahead.
No, that was my point.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
all. Yeah, the two things.
You said something really interesting, and I don't want this to slip away. I mean, I want to hear your opinion on this. People are tired of subscriptions, you said. Probably also because there's so many apps, so many services that we use nowadays that require a subscription. Then again, VCs will look for a business model that generates revenue monthly.
Yeah, that's...
and you also would like to think that you can have a positive cash flow. That and that always gets you to a point where you need a subscription model. So from the perspective of a product design and a product pricing, how could you look at things differently and yet be positive business-wise, but deliver a service in a new, different manner? That's not, let's say, a subscription-based model. Do you have anything in mind, or I don't know, have you ever explored this space as a Gen Z that is dissatisfied with the actual model?
Yeah, so we first of all, we hate it so much, honestly. But I think the solution is not in moving away from it, but going deeper into it.
Okay.
As in making it more granular. Because now you got to pick tier this with this features, this feature list, or tier this with this feature list. And you have two choices.
Sure, yeah.
And anyway, that's going to kind of murder us a bit on the pricing because we're going to pay for stuff that we're not going to use. And that's what most software providers are relying on, paying for stuff that you're not really going to use, right? So in my experience, honestly, we like to pay for value and the value that we actually get. So I'd see the subscription model going granular, going in options. So you choose this option. This is 0.2 euros additional per month. This is 0.4 euros. So you can just check mark exactly what you want and you get a personalized subscription pricing model just for your case. Cool. And for the features that you use. That's what I'd see in the future and really the future of the subscription model. Because we're not tired of it because of the payments. We're tired of it because of the extra value that we don't get to use because we don't need it then.
Sure. So basically an algorithm that will allow to tap into your behaviors and will charge you accordingly, right?
Yes.
Something more modular maybe.
Yeah, but in that case, the AI would kind of guess. But here I'm talking about agency, about actually choosing myself. Look, for example, from a video editing suite. I don't need the audio because I'm only doing video, right? I don't need the audio component.
So a modular plan that you choose or select before going into that service.
I see that really taking off in the next couple of years. And ultimately also the time variation, because that's kind of the lever that we can also use. So the kind of subscriptions that are weekly, monthly, yearly, per day, per use, there's plenty of innovation to play around with that. Me personally, I paid like 60 euros for a software for a one-time use for an event. I needed it for my business, but god damn, like.
Sure, but in terms of commitment, when you pay something a year ahead, it's, I don't know, for me at least, it kills me a little bit,
It is.
But I think, this is a space where we need a fresh approach.
Yeah.
Luca.
Just to add something on the pricing model, there's also a plenty of space for innovation from the VC perspective, because I think that search pricing, what Uber invented with their model, I think that's going to make a big splash in the next couple of years. So search pricing based on the number of users and on the traffic. We have more people now that need to use the product. It's no longer €3, it's 5, right? And that's also going to push people who can't afford the search pricing to the competitors. It's going to increase the pool of competitors, which, of course, ultimately will drive the price down. I think it's going to be a good thing if we implement this kind of like search dynamic pricing into our products, because then people who are not going to be satisfied with that solution will keep building competitors, which is good for the whole market.
Cool. Yeah, that's something really interesting that you mentioned. Although, it's a challenge. It really is a challenge here. But I totally feel what you're saying. Again, I wanted to thank you for sharing so many nice things. I hope that you will do a lot of impactful businesses in the future. Before we go, I want to ask you something that it's quite relevant when we talk about workforce and expectations. And if, I don't know, an HR manager will watch us now, or somebody from a large company, that I can tell you that they are interested in how to work with generations. I saw that. I used to work for corporations for like 20 years.
Condolences.
I know. But also, I think that there were a lot of good things that I took from corporations, so from large multinational companies. But it's about timing, and it was a lot about my context, which is totally different from yours right now. But what would you say that a manager needs to be aware when working with a Gen Z? It doesn't matter the project. Let's say we're keeping this technology space, the industries that you mentioned. How would that approach be different than a millennial or a Gen Z? What would you say that a special ingredient would be important to be recognized and be aware of, besides the traces that you mentioned earlier, that the interests that you mentioned earlier? Surely there are things that you could use in terms of soft skills when you are talking to a Gen Z.
Yeah, I think the most important part, like I mentioned before, Gen Z is very cynical. And you can see that in the way they sign their emails. It's literally a trend right now on TikTok, like unhinged ways my Gen Z employees sign off on their emails. So it's like people at the end saying, "Yeet, David," or crying on the inside, Maria. And that's how they sign the emails, because that's how they feel, and they're very honest about it, and they don't add any fluff. "Oh, kind regards and best wishes. Oh, dear Mrs., please send me the attached."
This is what we did.
Yeah. Sure. Just send me the file. Come on. I mean, we're all waiting. Cool. We all have stuff to do. Let's cut a bit the whole, fluff that we're building around the relationships that we have. And let's be very honest. Look, you're on this project. We're not really sure about this project. We'll give it 3 months. Let's push really hard in these 3 months. Because I've seen companies that hire Gen Zs and they're like, "Oh, you're on this very important project, and this is so important for our company, but it's actually just an experiment or something for the side," right? Yeah. Just be honest with them, because then they're going to push much harder than if you just tell them, "This is going to be so big and so important." Don't over fluff it, or don't try to overcompensate. Just be cynical with them, because they like that.
Yeah, but this is so healthy in terms of, anxiety, because I come from a workforce culture where we are building so many walls when we are interacting with each other, and we're not always honest, but we're not being dishonest in that we want to hurt you, but
you're being avoidant.
Yeah, maybe that could be. But I think it's so much healthier to be upfront from the beginning and not
with
trying.
The risk of conflict. Yes, because you're going to have conflict when you're being upfront, when you're being honest. There's going to be conflict between you and your Gen Z employees,
not
between
necessarily.
managers.
Not necessarily.
Depends.
Not necessarily. Really. I think if you're in touch with your empathy levels, and if you, I think leadership now needs a lot of soft skills. And I said, I've been saying this for many years, not since 2020. We need soft skills, empathy, and openness. It's also about being kind. And would you say that kindness is something that would help when managing a Gen Z?
I'd say yes, but not the kindness that we usually think of. Because the usual kindness is like, oh, let me take care of you and so on. No, it's the kindness from an honest parent, right? Like,
True.
Look, I'm being kind with you when I tell you this is not great, but you can improve. That's the honest type of kindness. You don't have to be an asshole to them.
Sure.
You have to be kind, yes. But the type of honest, like, the kind of parent that's real with their kids. It's not trying to fluff them up and give them the confidence that they didn't have when they were children and so on. It's the honest parent, like, look, you've drawn this macaroni stuff, right? It's great. For a first drawing, it's great. But you can improve if you do this, if you do that, if you look at these couple of things.
Okay.
So provide some actual, factual, practical stuff afterwards.
Fellowship, mentorship, and all that. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Luca. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We've discovered a lot of interesting things. And again, I hope that you guys are going to, hopefully spawn a new big company. No, let's not call it a unicorn, but the new big company in Romania, from both the program of Reactor and also from the startup studio.
Thanks. Hopefully as well from our side.
Sure. Good luck.